All right, everybody. I am joined by three guys that are just deep into March Madness, and we're going to have a really fun discussion. We've got Wayne Staats with us, who's been doing bracket history for over a decade. Sharrieff Muhammad, who is just totally immersed in the world of March Madness, social. And then we've got Andy Katz, whose Final Four coverage dates back to the Fab Five. So, guys, I want to have the best discussion ever. Is it a Cinderella? There's so many different ways that you can kind of define Cinderella. So we're going to play a game. I'm going to give you guys a considered or maybe considered Cinderella from the past, and you're going to come back at me with, is it a Cinderella, yes or no? All right, you guys ready?
Sure, go ahead.
Number 15, Richmond in 1991. Made it to the second round and beat number 2, Syracuse. Staats?
Yes.
Okay, Katz?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, because I'm gonna be a little bit of a contrarian. I'm gonna say maybe no. Richmond is in a better league now than they were then, but I don't think it was as big an upset as we've seen.
I'm also gonna go no. I know Katz obviously lived through the time, so he'd be able to tell me a little bit better. But when we talk about that upset, I don't think Syracuse was at that time as big of a brand. They hadn't won the national championship, so I'm gonna say no there.
Personally, I think we all have different perspectives on it, but I think anytime a 15 wins, that to me, that just no matter what happens, I think counts as Cinderella. They could lose by 50 points or 100 points the next round.
Wow.
I think it doesn't matter.
So regardless of who it is a 15.
Yep. Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
All right, you're going seed over Brand University.
Yeah, I lean more towards seed. I think brand does matter, but I mean, Syracuse wasn't, a nobody even before they won the championship. They've been to Final Fours before. They were big. They were 2 seed for a reason. Is kind of my deal. I like taking it in terms of like that year also specifically of where things happened. South Carolina was a 2 seed and lost to a 15 seed. I know South Carolina doesn't have as rich history as some other programs, but I still think a 15 beating a 2 is just always, like, for me personally, always a rubber stamp.
Can I just push back on one thing?
Yeah.
If you remember the COVID year, Dayton would have been a 1 seed with Obi Toppin. We never saw that tournament, obviously. So let's say, hypothetically, let's say Dayton was a 2, and the 15 was, Morehead State. And Morehead State beats Dayton. Is it still Cinderella?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see it. Yeah, I think seed over matters more than just a blanket program name, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right.
Let's keep it going, guys. Let's go to 1999, number 10, Gonzaga. And this time I'm going to start with Sharrieff so that we can switch up who goes first.
All right, cool. I'm gonna go yes, Cinderella. Gonzaga at this time was not the program that we know them to be today, so it has to be a Cinderella at that point.
So I'm going to answer this because I am going to date myself, and I was there from the beginning. I was there in Seattle. I was there in Phoenix. So I saw the birth of the current Gonzaga, and that was a Cinderella story, no question about it. They're not. I don't think they're a mid-major now anymore. Obviously, they pay a few crazy, great money. They were a small little program. People hadn't heard about them in the Northwest. When they went on that run, upset of Florida, ends up losing to the eventual champ UConn in the Elite Eight in Phoenix. That was a Cinderella run. Might be the only Gonzaga Cinderella run because they ended up having high seeds the rest of the way, pretty much. So I will say for sure 99 Gonzaga was a Cinderella.
Okay, we're for sure on that, Staats.
Yep. Easy.
Yep.
Definitely Cinderella. Yep.
Okay, no dispute on that one. Then we'll keep it moving. Let's go to number 11, UCLA. And this one's a little bit more recent in 2021, making it to the Final Four.
I'm going to jump in here and say that was also the bubble year.
Yeah.
And so kind of a crazy, quirky tournament, obviously. They started in the first 4, which was at Mackey Arena, and they played Michigan State. So, yeah, they were a double-digit seed, but that team was, had NBA players on it. I'm sorry. I don't care if they were an 11. First 4 to Final Four. When VCU did it, fine. Not UCLA in terms of a Cinderella. I say no.
No. Okay. Anyone got any disagreements? Stats, Sharrieff?
This is probably the toughest one, I think, that we've done so far. Andy, I think you're right, especially when you look at the talent. It wasn't just it was like a down team. Those teams that I think had a lot, now we know, have had a lot of talent on it and just kind of came together at the right time. 11 seed is, a power program like UCLA. I'm going to say no, but I totally understand people say yes.
Sharrieff?
Yeah, I think the context of the situation absolutely matters here. We're talking about UCLA, obviously massive brand. Then on top of that, like Andy said, it's in the bubble. So I think anything could have happened that year for one, and then for two, that roster was loaded. So I don't think you could consider them a Cinderella.
So then let me play devil's advocate here. So if that's not a Cinderella because of future NBA players and all that jazz, what do you guys think about Davidson with Steph Curry?
Davidson is a Cinderella.
Yep,
I think they were a Cinderella. That team actually beat, if I'm not mistaken, a higher seeded Gonzaga team earlier in the tournament. He was the only NBA player. And by the way, we didn't all for sure know he was going to be an NBA player. He still was sort of slight.
Hindsight's 2020, huh?
Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, he was not. He had an unbelievable season and run. He led that Cinderella run. So to me, even though single-digit seed, right? Or what seed were they?
10 seed.
10, okay. Just on the edge of that.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, you're talking about the context of the situation massively matters here. I'm sure at the time, if I remember correctly, people didn't think you could make a run like that with, like, heavily relying on the three-point shot. Steph, like you said, we did not know that he would be even the player in the NBA that he is today, let alone getting into the NBA. He's seen as this skinny shooter. So, yeah, definitely a Cinderella 100%.
All right, a couple more for you guys. This one's going to go back pretty far. 1985, number 8, Villanova won the championship. We'll start with you, Staats.
Yes, Cinderella.
The context was who else was around that team in the Big East. Yeah. Because that was the Ewing era, that was the Mullen era, and that was a Villanova team that did not have, they ended up having pros, but not to that level. They were not the best team in their league. And, Georgetown was expected to win that national championship. It was kind of a shock that Villanova even got to the title game. And so for them to win it, there's no question that was a Cinderella.
Sharrieff, newer generation, what do you think?
Yeah, I know we spoke a lot about brands here, and I know it's Villanova, but if you are the lowest seed ever to win a national championship, you are a Cinderella by definition. I'm sorry. I don't care if you are Kentucky winning the national championship.
2016, number 10, Syracuse. Sharrieff, you can start us off this time.
I'm going no.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, because, we talked about earlier with the Richmond Syracuse. By 2010, they'd already won a national championship. They'd had some great runs, obviously tons of pros. It's kind of what Wayne was saying. Sometimes brand names, they may have a roster that's not to their seed, but they played to their seed. And that was a year where they did. They had better talent than their seed, not a Cinderella.
I'm going to say no as well. And I'm pretty sure that was the team that benefited from Michigan State losing to 15 Middle Tennessee. Again, that take away from Syracuse. You got to play the teams that you see in your bracket. But that definitely cleared the path for them. I know they did beat Virginia in the Elite Eight. It was a 1 seed, but definitely a lot easier just to beat a 1 seed instead of a 1 and a 2 and a 3.
Okay, so if we're talking about seeds, Staats, you said earlier a 15-2 is a Cinderella for you. What about Lehigh, number 15 in 2012, beat number 2 Duke? Staats, I'm assuming that's a yes from you?
Yeah, definitely a yes for me. And that was like hours after Norfolk State beat Mizzou, another 15-2. That was a crazy few-hour window on that day. But for sure, Lehigh, definitely Cinderella.
We can't project to the NBA because, again, we didn't know that C.J. McCollum, would be an NBA player, let alone a pretty good one. Mm-hmm. So I will say yes, that was a Cinderella upset for Lehigh.
Sharrieff, agree?
Yeah, gonna sweep that, yes.
So it doesn't matter to you guys, and this is just now a question of curiosity, how far they make it in the tournament?
It does.
It does?
Yeah.
So you define Cinderella not just by one win.
Here's what I'm asking. Yeah, is it the run or is it just one win?
It can flip. So if you're beating number 2 Duke in the first round and you happen to lose the next round, I think you're a Cinderella. But again, I think potentially in the Dayton situation, I don't know if I would have said you said maybe Morehead State plays them or something. I don't know if they're a Cinderella. I don't know. I'd have to see the context of the situation.
I'm going to agree with you, Sharrieff, because I'll give you another example. Abilene Christian, who most of the country had not heard of, and they beat Texas. Actually, the last game, Shaka Smart coached at Texas. It wasn't a great Texas team, but it's a great brand. Then they lost the next round, and you forget about them. So I agree with you. I would not say that was a Cinderella, whereas Loyola Chicago, that went all the way to the Final Four and beat brand, for the most part, definitely a Cinderella run.
About that Abilene Christian thing, I think that also got overlooked because Oral Roberts made the Sweet 16 that year as a 15
Yes.
seed. So I think that's easy. Like, not that the existence of one Cinderella doesn't mean there can't be others in a tournament, but I think that one took a lot of the attention, rightfully so, for Oral Roberts.
Well, any other ones you guys think you might disagree on? Like any hot takes here?
Well, let me just say this. There's been some one-offs. Bucknell, Mercer. Are those Cinderellas if they were just a one-off?
Yeah, it's crazy. I was gonna contradict myself a little bit here because I don't think Oakland last season was a Cinderella. I know they beat Kentucky, but maybe it's because because of how much I cover the sport now. I watched that Kentucky team the whole year. They were very bad defensively, had a really good team offensively, but I'm not going to say it wasn't a shock, but the real Cinderella that year was NC State considering the context of the situation.
St. Peter's, to me, is a much better Cinderella than UMBC or Farleigh Dickinson because they went to the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
And UMB, to your point, Sharrieff, the UMBC Virginia game, I'm not saying no one else could have beaten that Virginia team, but it was a good 16 to play Virginia. And that UMBC team probably wasn't going to beat, let's just say if it was like this year's Auburn as a one. Mm-hmm. Like that UMBC team's not beating this one Auburn, but Virginia was a ripe one to beat.
There's no way to define Cinderella, basically. Like we can't put Cinderella in a dictionary. Is that what you guys are saying?
Yeah, which is funny because if you bring up like FDU over Purdue, on the other hand, they did not match up well on paper against Purdue. Like you're talking about the shortest team in the country going against the tallest player in the country essentially, and the national player of the year. So I feel like in that scenario, they are Cinderella. Like 16 over 1, obviously the second time it ever happened, but it was a poor matchup. And an extreme shock because everyone was making jokes before the game about how short they were. And yeah, it was just a magical time.
We could have a number of teams this year, for example, could be North Carolina, could be Arkansas, it could be Indiana, that have a lot of talent, but they could be double-digit seeds. And they may lose to, like a St. Mary's or someone like that, that's a single-digit seed. And people say, oh, that's a big upset because, the 10 or 11 beat the 7 or the 6 or whatever. But really, on paper, nah, not really.
And Staats, we never heard if you thought Oakland was a Cinderella, and we'll get your final thoughts before we wrap it up, too.
Yes, I think they're Cinderella. I think the threshold for like the 14, 15, 16 is lower, where if winning a game is good enough. But if you're like UCLA, for example, as 11 seed, like you have to do more than just win a game. Or even like UNC when they played the title game as an 8 seed, they lost there, but like that's a normal. Like they went far, but it's still UNC, and it was still just an 8 seed. So I think if you're 16 or 15, win one game, I think to me personally, I think you qualify, especially if you beat like Lehigh beating Duke. Like that's just. When you're Duke, if you lose to a team that's 15 or 16, that's like the most Cinderella you can get, even if that team does not win another game in the tournament.
Yeah, I think the conclusion that we're coming to here, it really is. It's the feeling that it personally gives you.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of thinking about it, like I'm not sure if that's another reason why with the Oakland thing, I'm not sure if you can have 2 Cinderellas in one tournament. Like, I don't know if that's really a concept to me personally, and that's part of the reason why I don't think Oakland is a Cinderella for that reason. Because to me, there has to be the Cinderella, and NC State's run started even before the tournament started. They weren't supposed to be there. Yeah, they weren't supposed to be there to begin with.
Staats, Oakland was yes a Cinderella. Sharrieff said no. Katz, what was yours?
Yeah, I may say no because that Kentucky team. Again, for those that don't, and I love it that a lot of people don't follow the sport religiously, and yet they're like, oh my God, Oakland, and it's, the Oakland, California. No, not Oakland, California, Oakland, Michigan, beat Kentucky. and they're like, what? But if you watch that Kentucky team, they were ripe to be beaten last year. They were not what they've been, so it was not that crazy that Oakland beat them.
The one thing I'll push back though, again, Sharrieff, is that there's only one Cinderella. I think if there's St. Peter's existing doesn't mean that another surprising run means that no one else can kind of get that kind of claim as Princeton, as a 15 seed making the Sweet 16. Kind of it's hard to say that is not all Cinderella, depending on what else happens in the bracket.
Florida Atlantic, which now, as we've later learned, I mean, 3 guys that now are playing high major. They're all going to be pros in Golden, Martin, and Davis. They get to the Final Four, and again, it's Florida Atlantic. Who have they been? Was that he's saying no?
All right, go
We
around
had a
the
great
horn.
record.
Stats, what do you think?
I'm going to say no. Also, even they push back against that kind of term being thrown their way. Not that means that teams can't, have the final say, but especially also they benefited from the bracket, how they got there. Because if they beat the Memphis in the first round, Memphis would have played FU in the second round, and Memphis could have gone to the Final Four.
Yep.
So I think it depends on the bracket too. It's a shocker for sure, but I think it would just benefit the bracket. And again, that's not taken away from winning the games that you get. But it makes it a lot easier when you play a 16 seed instead of a 1 seed in the second round.
Yeah, I was about to say they had like 30 wins in the regular season, or close to that, like in the high 20s. In my opinion, not a Cinderella. They were a low seed. It could have been it was a good team. Like we were talking about the next season, it was a disappointment that they didn't make it further than what they did. So not a Cinderella for me.
All right, guys. Well, this was so much fun. I think we came to a little bit of a consensus there that it's kind of what you feel or depends on the situation. But Cinderella, we can't find it. All right. Well, thanks, guys, so much. Katz, Sharrieff, Wayne, appreciate your time.